The town of Devil's Hollow earned its name honestly. It was a place where decent folks avoided after dark, and even the daylight hours carried shadows that seemed too deep for comfort. In the summer of 1876, the settlement thrived on the kind of commerce that respectable territories had learned to prohibit. But here in the lawless expanse between Colorado and New Mexico, money spoke louder than morality. Boone Walker rode into Devil's Hollow on a Tuesday morning, his horse's hooves raising dust clouds that settled like judgment over the crude wooden buildings lining the main street. At 45, he carried himself with the careful stillness of a man who had learned that sudden movements could shatter what little peace remained in his world. His eyes, once blue as mountain sky, had faded to the color of winter storms, beautiful in their way, but carrying warnings of harsh weather ahead. He had not come to Devil's Hollow seeking companionship or comfort. For 3 years, since burying his wife Rebecca and their stillborn son in the rocky soil of his isolated ranch, Boone had avoided human contact beyond the basic necessities of survival. But supplies were needed, and this godless town was the closest trading post to his property, 90 miles of brutal country away from anything resembling civilization. The general store provided what he needed: salt, coffee, ammunition, basic medical supplies. But as he loaded his purchases onto his pack horse, sounds from the building next door captured his attention despite his determination to conduct his business and leave immediately. "Fresh merchandise, gentlemen," called a voice from inside what appeared to be a saloon, but clearly served other, darker purposes. Young, untrained, and ready for proper education. The words hit Boone like physical blows, reminding him of stories he'd heard but tried not to believe. Stories about the trade in human souls that flourished in places where law enforcement feared a venture. His first instinct was to mount his horse and ride away from whatever evil was transpiring behind those doors. But something held him frozen in place. Perhaps it was a memory of Rebecca's voice, reading aloud from her Bible about protecting the defenseless. Perhaps it was simply the recognition that a man who had lost everything worth protecting might still have the power to protect someone else. Whatever the reason, Boone found himself tying his horses to the hitching post and walking toward the sounds of commerce in human suffering. The interior of the Red Dog Saloon was exactly what he had expected. Smoke-filled, reeking of unwashed bodies and stale whiskey, populated by men whose eyes held a particular emptiness that comes from abandoning all pretense of decency. On a makeshift stage at the far end of the room, a young woman stood with the careful stillness of someone who had learned that any movement might bring unwanted attention. Anna was perhaps 19, with auburn hair that caught the lamplight and green eyes that should have sparkled with life, but instead held the guarded wariness of a wild animal caught in a trap. She wore a simple cotton dress that had once been white, but now bore the stains of captivity, and her hands were clasped so tightly before her that Boone could see the white of her knuckles from across the room. "What am I bid for this lovely flower?" called out Sam Morrison, the saloon owner whose reputation for cruelty was known throughout the territory. "She's clean, healthy, and completely untrained. Perfect for a man who likes to provide his own education." The bidding started immediately, with voices calling out amounts that made Boone's stomach turn. $20, $50, $75. The numbers climbed while Anna's face grew paler, her eyes focusing on something beyond the crowd, as if her spirit was already retreating to whatever safe place her mind could create. Boone had exactly $37 in his pocket, money intended for winter supplies that would keep him alive through the harsh months ahead. Against men bidding hundreds of dollars, it was laughably inadequate. But as he watched Anna's desperate attempt to maintain her dignity in the face of ultimate degradation, he stepped forward from the back of the room. "I offer something different," he said, his voice cutting through the noise of drunken bidding. The room fell silent, all eyes turning toward the tall, weathered stranger who had spoken with such quiet authority. "And what would that be?" Morrison asked, his tone suggesting amusement at the interruption. Boone reached into his vest and withdrew a folded document, the legal deed to his ranch, the only thing of value he owned in the world. 3,000 acres of prime grazing land, he said simply. Water rights, mineral rights, and a house. Worth more than all the money being bid here. Morrison's eyes widened as he examined the deed, his breathing growing excited as he read the legal description of property that represented substantial wealth. This is considerable value," Morrison muttered, then looked at Anna, then back at the deed. But what do you intend to do with the girl? Marry her, Boone said without hesitation. Give her legal protection and a decent home. The statement caused an uproar in the crowd, with men shouting protests about being cheated out of their sport. But Morrison held up his hand for silence, his calculating mind working through the implications of the offer. Marriage means she'd be legally protected from any future business arrangements. Morrison said slowly, Are you certain about this trade, stranger? I'm certain, Boone replied, his eyes meeting Anna's across the smoky room. The deed for the girl's freedom, and my name for her protection. Morrison's greed won out over any other considerations. Sold, he said quickly, before the crowd could organize further protests. The property deed for legal marriage to Anna Walsh. As the transaction was completed with bewildering speed, Anna looked directly at her unexpected savior for the first time. In Boone's storm-colored eyes, she saw not hunger or ownership, but something she had almost forgotten existed. Basic human decency offered without expectation of return. Miss, Boone said gently as he approached the stage, my name is Boone Walker. I'd like to offer you my protection and my name, if you'll accept them. Anna nodded once, unable to speak, but somehow understanding that this quiet stranger represented her only chance for salvation. As they walked out of the Red Dog Saloon together, past Angry Bitters and into the harsh sunlight of Devil's Hollow's Main Street, neither Boone nor Anna knew that this desperate transaction would become the foundation for healing that both of them desperately needed. A second chance at life for a man who had given up hope, and the first chance at freedom for a woman who had never known it. The wagon ride from Devil's Hollow to Boone's ranch took the better part of 2 days through country that seemed determined to test the endurance of anyone foolish enough to traverse it. Anna sat beside Boone on the wooden seat, wrapped in a blanket he had purchased for her along with change of clothes and basic necessities, still unable to fully comprehend that she was free from the nightmare that had consumed the past 6 months of her life. For the first several hours, they traveled in complete silence. Boone focused on navigating the rough trail, while occasionally glancing at his unexpected companion, trying to understand what he had committed himself to. Anna stared at the vast landscape around them, marveling at horizons that stretched beyond anything she could see, the first unlimited vista she had experienced since her stepfather had sold her to Morrison's establishment. Are you cold? Boone asked finally, noting that despite the blanket, Anna was shivering slightly in the mountain air. No, Anna replied, her voice barely above a whisper. I haven't been outside in a very long time. I forgot how big the world was. The simple statement hit Boone with unexpected force, reminding him of his own self-imposed isolation and the way grief had made him forget that there was beauty beyond the boundaries of his own pain. How long were you held there? He asked gently. 6 months, Anna said, her voice growing even quieter. Since my stepfather sold me to pay his gambling debts. Before that, I lived on his farm, taking care of the house and the children from his first marriage. Boone felt anger rise in his chest at the casual cruelty of a man who would sell his stepdaughter to settle debts, but he kept his voice calm. What happened to your real parents? My mother died when I was 16. Consumption. My father had died 3 years before that accident with a bull. Anna's tone was matter-of-fact, but Boone could hear the accumulated pain of multiple losses. My stepfather, Harold, married my mother when she was already sick. I think he was more interested in the farm than in caring for a dying woman and her daughter. And after your mother died, he made it clear that I was a burden he couldn't afford to keep. When his gambling got out of hand and he owed money to dangerous men, selling me seemed like his best option. Anna paused, then looked directly at Boone. Why did you do it? Why did you give up your ranch for a stranger? Boone was quiet for several long moments, trying to find words for impulses he didn't fully understand himself. Because what was happening to you was wrong, he said finally, and because I had the power to stop it. But you gave up everything you owned. Your home, your land. I gave up property for a person, Boone corrected gently. That seems like the right choice to me. Anna studied his profile as he spoke, seeing the grief etched in the lines around his eyes and the careful way he held himself, as if any relaxation might allow pain to overwhelm him. You lost someone, she said softly. It wasn't a question. My wife, Rebecca, and our son, who was born sleeping. Boone's voice carried the weight of losses that had never fully healed. 3 years ago. Since then, I've been existing, not really living. I'm sorry, Anna whispered. That must have been terrible. It was. Still is. Some days. Boone glanced at her again. But I've learned that loss doesn't give us the right to ignore other people's suffering when we have the power to help. As they made camp that first night, sharing a simple meal of beans and coffee beside a small fire, both Boone and Anna struggled with the enormous awkwardness of their situation. They were strangers bound together by an extraordinary transaction, facing the prospect of marriage and shared life without any of the normal foundation of courtship or emotional connection. What happens now? Anna asked as they settled into their bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire. What do you expect from me? The question carried implications that made Boone's chest tighten. He understood that from Anna's perspective, she had simply been transferred from one form of captivity to another, with no reason to believe his intentions were different from those of the men who had been bidding against him. I expect nothing from you except that you allow me to provide you with safety and shelter, Boone said firmly. You'll have your own room, your own space, and the freedom to make choices about your future. The marriage is for legal protection, to ensure that no one can ever claim ownership of you again. You don't want. Anna began, then stopped, unable to voice the question. I want you to be safe, Boone said, understanding what she was asking. I want you to have the chance to decide who you want to be and what you want to do with your life. That's all. Anna was quiet for several long moments, absorbing this response. I don't understand why someone would do that for a stranger. Give up everything and expect nothing in return. Maybe because the alternative, watching evil triumph when you have the power to prevent it, is worse than any material loss. That night, as they lay on opposite sides of the dying fire under a canopy of stars that seemed close enough to touch, both Boone and Anna reflected on the strange turn of events that had brought them together. For Anna, it was the first night in months that she had slept without fear what morning might bring. For Boone, it was the first time in years that he felt a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. When they reached Boone's ranch the following afternoon, Anna saw a property that clearly showed the neglect of a man who had lost interest in maintaining anything beyond basic necessity. The house was solid but weathered, the barn functional but in need of repair, and the pastures empty of livestock except for a few horses. It's not much to look at anymore, Boone said apologetically as they approached the house. I haven't had much reason to keep it up properly. It looks peaceful, Anna said, and meant it. After months of captivity in a windowless room above a saloon, the sight of open space and quiet horizons was more beautiful than any mansion could have been. Inside, the house showed clear signs of man living alone without attention to comfort or beauty. The rooms were clean but sparse, lacking any of the warm touches that a woman's presence might have provided. You can have the main bedroom, Boone said, indicating the room that had obviously belonged to him and his wife. I'll sleep in the small room off the kitchen. I can't take your bedroom, Anna protested. It's not my bedroom anymore, Boone replied quietly. It was ours, mine and Rebecca's. I haven't slept there since she died. Maybe it's time for that room to have life in it again. That evening, as they shared a simple meal and began the careful process of learning to share space without overstepping uncertain boundaries, both Boone and Anna understood that they'd begun something unprecedented in both their experiences, a relationship based not on passion or romance, but on mutual respect and a shared commitment to creating something good from the ruins of their individual tragedies. The first month of their arrangement passed quietly, with Boone and Anna establishing routines that allowed them to share the ranch without the constant awkwardness of uncertainty about boundaries and expectations. Boone threw himself into the long-neglected work of restoring his property, while Anna gradually explored her new home and began to understand what freedom actually felt like. The legal marriage ceremony had taken place in the nearest town with a proper courthouse, performed by a judge who asked no questions about the unusual circumstances that had brought them together. Anna wore a simple blue dress that Boone had purchased for her, and he wore his cleanest work clothes and the expression of a man determined to do right by someone who had been wronged by too many others. Do you take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer, till death do you part? The judge had asked. I do, Boone had replied, his voice steady and sure. When the same question was posed to Anna, she had looked into Boone's storm-colored eyes and found the courage to say, "I do," knowing that she was choosing protection and partnership rather than romantic love, but choosing it freely for the first time in her adult life. Back at the ranch, they settled into a life that was unlike anything either had experienced before. Boone found himself taking more care with his appearance and his surroundings, as if Anna's presence reminded him that life could be about more than mere survival. Anna discovered the pleasure of having meaningful work to do, cooking, cleaning, tending a small garden, and helping with the lighter ranch chores. "You don't have to work so hard," Boone told her one morning as he found her scrubbing the kitchen floor with determined intensity. "This is your home now, not a place where you have to earn your keep." "I want to work," Anna replied, sitting back on her heels to look at him. "For 6 months, I was completely powerless, unable to make any choices or contribute anything useful. Having work to do that matters, that helps build something good. It makes me feel human again." Boone understood exactly what she meant. Since Rebecca's death, he had used work as medicine for grief, a way to keep moving forward when everything else felt pointless. But seeing Anna find purpose in shared labor made him realize that work could be about building rather than just enduring. Their relationship began to shift from careful coexistence to genuine partnership as they tackled the job of restoring the ranch together. Anna proved to have an eye for organization and efficiency, while Boone provided the physical strength and technical knowledge needed for major repairs and improvements. "What would you think about getting some cattle?" Anna asked one evening as they sat on the front porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and purple. "I know you had to sell your land to rescue me, but maybe we could start small, build a herd gradually." Boone looked at her with surprise and growing respect. "You've been thinking about ranch management?" "I've been thinking about the future," Anna said simply. "About what we could build together if we put our minds to it. You have the knowledge and experience, and I have energy and ideas, and now I have the freedom to use them." The conversation marked the beginning of their planning for a shared future that went beyond simple survival. They began discussing improvements to the property, potential sources of income, and long-term goals that assumed they would be working together for years to come. But the most significant change was in how they related to each other on a personal level. The careful politeness of their early weeks together had given way to comfortable companionship, and that companionship was gradually deepening into something that felt like genuine affection. Anna began to see past Boone's grief-hardened exterior to the fundamentally decent man who had been willing to sacrifice everything to save a stranger. Boone began to see past Anna's trauma to the intelligent, resilient woman who was determined to build something meaningful from the freedom he had helped her win. "Can I ask you something?" Anna said one evening as they worked together to repair a section of fence damaged by winter storms. "Of course. Do you think Rebecca would approve of this? Of me being here, of what we're trying to build together?" Boone set down his hammer and looked at Anna directly, understanding that her question came from genuine concern rather than insecurity. "Rebecca believed that people were put on this earth to help each other," he said finally. "She would have wanted me to save you, and she would have wanted you to have the chance to build a good life. I think she would be glad that this house has laughter in it again." "Does it have laughter?" Boone realized with surprise that it did. Without his noticing, Anna's presence had gradually filled their home with small joys. Humming while she worked, gentle teasing during their evening conversations, genuine delight in small accomplishments like a successful batch of bread or a garden producing its first vegetables. "It does," he said, and smiled at the wonder in his own voice. "More than it has in 3 years. That night, as they settled into their separate bedrooms, both Boone and Anna understood that their practical arrangement was becoming something more complex and precious than either had expected. They were healing each other not through romance or passion, but through the simple act of choosing, day after day, to build something good together. Their marriage was becoming real not because of legal documents or physical intimacy, but because they were creating a shared life based on mutual respect, common purpose, and a gradual recognition that they genuinely enjoyed each other's company and valued each other's contributions to their common work. Spring arrived at the ranch with unusual gentleness, as if the land itself was responding to gradual healing taking place in the lives of its inhabitants. Anna had spent the winter months transforming the house from a place where a grief-stricken man simply existed into a home where two people were learning to build a life together. The changes were subtle but profound. Curtains appeared at the windows, sewn from fabric Anna had purchased during their monthly trips to town. Meals became events to be shared and savored rather than mere fuel for continued survival. The house filled with small sounds of domestic contentment. Anna humming while she worked, the gentle conversations that accompanied their evening planning sessions, the comfortable silences of two people who had learned to be at peace in each other's presence. But the most significant change was in Boone himself. The hard shell of grief that had protected him for 3 years was beginning to crack, revealing glimpses of the man he had been before loss had taught him that caring was dangerous. "You're different than when I first met you," Anna observed one evening as they sat together on the porch, watching their small herd of cattle graze in the distance. They had managed to purchase 6 head with money earned from selling vegetables and eggs in town, and the sight of livestock on his land again filled Boone with satisfaction he hadn't expected to feel. "Different how?" Boone asked, though he suspected he knew what she meant. "Less guarded, as if you're not constantly expecting bad news anymore." Anna paused and added gently, "You smile now. I don't think you smiled once during our first month together." Boone realized she was right. Somewhere in the process of working alongside Anna to rebuild his ranch and create their shared life, he had rediscovered capacity for contentment, even happiness. "You've given me reasons to smile," he said simply, "and reasons to believe that good things can still happen." The growing ease between them was tested when Anna fell ill with fever in early May. For 3 days, she was barely conscious, burning with heat that reminded Boone too vividly of Rebecca's final illness. He tended to Anna with careful attention, cooling her with damp cloths, ensuring she drank enough water, and sitting beside her bed through the long nights when her breathing seemed too shallow and her skin too pale. "Please don't die," he found himself whispering during the worst night, when Anna's fever spiked and she became delirious. I can't lose someone else I care about." The admission surprised him with its intensity. Somewhere in their months together, Anna had become more than just someone he was helping. She had become genuinely precious to him, someone whose well-being was essential to his own happiness. When Anna's fever finally broke on the 4th morning, and she opened her eyes to find Boone asleep in the chair beside her bed, she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with illness. This quiet, careful man had tended to her with the devotion of someone who truly cared about her welfare, not as an obligation or investment, but as a person he valued. "Boone," she whispered, her voice hoarse from fever. He woke immediately, his eyes going to her face with an expression of such relief and tenderness that Anna felt her heart catch in her chest. "How do you feel?" he asked, reaching out to touch her forehead and check for lingering fever. "Better, much better." Anna caught his hand as he started to pull it away, holding it gently in both of hers. "Thank you for taking care of me." "You don't need to thank me for that," Boone said softly. "Taking care of you, it's not a burden, Anna. It's something I want to do." The simple honesty of his statement hung between them, carrying implications that neither had fully acknowledged before. They were no longer just two people sharing a convenient arrangement. They were two people who had come to care deeply about each other's happiness and well-being. "Boone," Anna said carefully, still holding his hand, what we built together, it feels like more than just partnership to me. What does it feel like to you?" Anna took a breath, gathering courage to speak a truth that felt both wonderful and terrifying. "It feels like love, not the desperate, needy kind that people write poems about, but something steadier and more reliable, like coming home to someone who sees you clearly and chooses to be glad you exist." Boone felt something shift in his chest, a warmth spreading through spaces that had been cold for 3 years. "That's exactly what it feels like to me, too," he said quietly. "I love you, Anna. Not because I rescued you or because you're grateful, but because you're brave and kind and intelligent, and because you've made my life better in ways I didn't know were possible." Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, full of wonder at the connection they had discovered growing between them, without either quite noticing when friendship had deepened into something more precious. "I want this to be real," Anna whispered against his forehead. "Not just a legal arrangement, but a real marriage, a choice we make every day, because we want to build our lives together." "It's already real," Boone replied, gathering her carefully into his arms. It became real the moment we started choosing each other instead of just enduring circumstances. As Anna recovered her strength over the following weeks, their relationship settled into a new pattern of acknowledged affection and shared commitment. They began sleeping in the same room, though their physical intimacy developed slowly and gently, with both of them understanding that trust built gradually was stronger than passion imposed suddenly. By summer, neighbors began commenting on how settled and content they both appeared. Anna had earned respect in their small community for her intelligence and kindness, while Boone had emerged from his isolation to become someone people sought out for advice and assistance. "You two have built something beautiful here," said Dr. Hayes during one of his visits to check on patients in the area. "A marriage based on mutual respect and shared work. That's rarer and more valuable than most people realize." That evening, as they sat together planning the fall harvest and discussing their hopes for expanding their small operation, both Boone and Anna understood that they had achieved something extraordinary. They had transformed a desperate rescue into genuine love, a legal arrangement into a real partnership, and two broken lives into something whole and meaningful and full of promise for the future. The autumn of their second year together brought challenges that would test the strength of the foundation Boone and Anna had built during their months of healing and partnership. A severe early winter threatened their small herd. Their modest savings were strained by necessary improvements to the ranch, and neighboring properties were being sold to a large cattle company that had little interest in maintaining the community relationships that had sustained the region's small ranchers. "The Consolidated Cattle Company made an offer on our land," Boone told Anna one evening as they reviewed the official letter that had arrived with their weekly mail delivery. "They're offering enough money to set us up comfortably in town, maybe even in a larger city back east." Anna looked up from the account books where she had been calculating their winter feed requirements. "What kind of offer?" "More than the land is worth by any reasonable assessment," Boone admitted. "Enough to buy a house in Denver, or even go back to places where you could have access to libraries, theaters, society." The conversation touched on something they had never directly discussed: the fact that Anna's education and intelligence were perhaps better suited to town life than to the isolation and hard work of frontier ranching. She read voraciously from the books they ordered from Denver, wrote thoughtful letters to the few correspondents she had maintained from her life before her stepfather's betrayal, and sometimes seemed to hunger for intellectual stimulation that their quiet ranch life couldn't provide. "Do you want to sell?" Anna asked, her tone carefully neutral. "I want you to be happy," Boone replied honestly. "And I want to make sure you have choices about how you spend your life. If you prefer to live somewhere with more opportunities." Anna set down her pen and looked at him directly. "Boone, do you think I'm unhappy here?" "I think you're making the best of circumstances you didn't choose," Boone said carefully. "I think you might have different dreams for your life if you were free to pursue them." "I am free to pursue them," Anna said firmly. "That's what you gave me, the freedom to choose. And I choose this. I choose our life, our work, our future together. Even if it means isolation, hard work, missing out on the cultural advantages you might have in city." Anna was quiet for several long moments, then smiled with an expression that was both gentle and determined. "Boone, for the first 18 years of my life, I lived with people who saw me as a burden or an asset, never as a person with my own value. For 6 months, I was treated as property to be bought and sold. You're the first person who has ever seen me as someone worth protecting and respecting for my own sake." She paused and continued, "Why would I trade that for theaters and libraries? This ranch, this life we're building, it's the first place I've ever truly belonged. It's the first time I've ever felt genuinely valued and loved." The conversation marked a turning point in their relationship. They decided not only to refuse the cattle company's offer, but to actively work to help their neighbors resist the pressure to sell their properties to the large corporation. "If we organize the smaller ranchers," Anna suggested, "we might be able to create a cooperative that gives us better bargaining power for supplies and marketing. Strength through cooperation rather than individual struggle." Boone looked at his wife with growing admiration. "You've been thinking about this for a while, haven't you?" "I've been thinking about how to protect what we've built," Anna replied. "All of us, not just our ranch, but this whole community of people who chose to make their lives here." The effort to organize their neighbors became their shared mission, through the winter months. Anna's education and writing skills made her the natural choice to draft proposals and correspondence, while Boone's growing reputation for fairness and practical wisdom made him an effective spokesman for their cause. Their kitchen table became an informal headquarters for planning meetings and strategy sessions. Their modest home frequently hosted gatherings of ranchers who had never before considered cooperation as an alternative to individual struggle. "What you two have started here," said Frank Patterson, their nearest neighbor, "it's changing how people think about working together instead of just competing with each other." The cooperative they organized proved successful enough to attract attention from territorial officials and Eastern investors interested in supporting alternatives to large-scale corporate agriculture. By spring, they had negotiated contracts that gave small ranchers better prices for their cattle and access to supplies at reduced costs. But the most significant development was personal rather than economic. In early summer, Anna discovered she was pregnant. "Are you happy?" she asked Boone as they sat together on their porch, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "I'm more than happy," Boone replied, covering her hand with his. "I'm grateful and excited and maybe a little scared, but mostly amazed that life has given us this gift." "Scared about being a father again?" Boone was quiet for several moments, then spoke honestly about fears he'd been trying not to acknowledge. "Scared about losing someone else I love. Scared about not being able to protect you and the baby from all the things that can go wrong." Anna took his face in her hands, making him look directly at her. "We can't live our lives in fear of loss," she said gently. "We can be careful and prepared, but we can't let the possibility of tragedy prevent us from embracing the joy that's available to us." The pregnancy progressed smoothly, with Anna continuing to manage the cooperative's paperwork and planning, while Boone threw himself into preparing for their growing family. He expanded the house, improved their financial security through careful management of their growing herd, and created an environment where a child could thrive. Their daughter was born on a cold December morning, with the nearest neighbor woman attending the birth while Boone paced anxiously in the kitchen. When he finally heard the strong, healthy cry of his child, he felt a joy so intense it was almost overwhelming. "She's perfect," Anna whispered when Boone was allowed into the bedroom to meet his daughter. "Look at her, Boone. We made this beautiful little person together." Baby Rebecca, named for Boone's first wife with Anna's wholehearted approval, was small but strong, with Anna's auburn hair and Boone's blue eyes. Holding her, Boone felt the familiar wonder of new fatherhood, but also something different, a sense that this child represented not just continuation of his family line, but transformation and hope. "She's going to grow up knowing she was wanted and celebrated," Anna said as she watched Boone cradle their daughter with practiced gentleness. "She's going to grow up in a community where cooperation and mutual support are normal, where people take care of each other." As they sat together in their comfortable home, surrounded by the evidence of their shared work, the thriving ranch, the successful cooperative, their healthy daughter sleeping peacefully in her cradle, both Boone and Anna understood that they had achieved something remarkable. They had transformed a desperate rescue into a love story, a practical arrangement into a real partnership, and two damaged lives into the foundation for something that would influence their community for generations to come.